El Salvador declared a state of emergency in March 2022. This was in response to a surge in gang violence. However, the state of emergency has continued for over 1,000 days. It has led to widespread human rights violations. Over 83,000 people have been detained. Many arrests are arbitrary. Suspicion of gang affiliation is often based on flimsy evidence. This includes factors like age, appearance, and having tattoos. The state of emergency has eroded due process. Many detentions lack proper judicial oversight. There are documented cases without warrants or prior investigations. The use of excessive force during arrests is also a serious concern. Reports of beatings and abuse by security forces are widespread. The government justifies these measures as necessary to combat gang violence. However, critics argue they are disproportionate and target marginalized communities. The lack of transparency and accountability has worsened the situation. The international community has expressed deep concern over the human rights situation. Various organizations have called on the Salvadoran government to respect international law. They urge an end to arbitrary detentions and due process violations. El Salvador's prisons are severely overcrowded. With a capacity for 30,000, they now hold over 83,000 inmates. This overcrowding creates inhumane living conditions. Prisoners face a lack of basic necessities. These include adequate food, clean water, and medical care. The lack of proper medical attention has dire consequences. Over 300 deaths have been reported in custody since the state of emergency began. Many are attributed to preventable causes. These include treatable illnesses and injuries sustained during arrest or detention. The situation inside these prisons has been described as hellish. Reports of torture and ill treatment are rampant. Inmates are subjected to physical and psychological abuse. The overcrowding exacerbates the spread of diseases. The government claims it is working to improve prison conditions. However, the scale of the crisis is overwhelming. The sheer number of detainees makes it difficult to address the lack of basic necessities. The situation demands immediate attention and action to prevent further suffering. The Salvadoran government has defended its actions. It argues that the state of emergency is necessary to dismantle powerful gangs. They point to a decrease in homicides as evidence of success. However, critics argue that these gains come at a high cost. They say the government is sacrificing human rights for short-term security gains. The government has also implemented legal reforms that raise concerns. These include provisions that allow for pre-trial detention without charge for extended periods. This particularly targets those accused of gang-related crimes. Critics argue these reforms further erode due process. They give the government sweeping powers to silence dissent. The international community has responded with a mix of condemnation and cautious engagement. The United Nations and human rights organizations have called for an end to the state of emergency. They urge the government to address the human rights violations. Some countries have imposed sanctions or withdrawn aid in protest. El Salvador made headlines in 2021 by adopting Bitcoin as legal tender. The government, led by President Nayib Bukele, argued that this would promote financial inclusion and attract investment. However, the move has been met with skepticism and criticism. Concerns remain about Bitcoin's volatility and its suitability as a national currency. In December 2024, the International Monetary Fund, or IMF, approved a $1.4 billion loan program for El Salvador. This was intended to help the country address its economic challenges. However, the IMF program came with conditions. These included a requirement for El Salvador to remove Bitcoin's legal tender status. The IMF argued that this was necessary to protect financial stability. The Salvadoran government has agreed to some of the IMF's conditions. However, it has continued to invest in Bitcoin. This has raised questions about the government's commitment to fiscal responsibility. It also raises concerns about the long-term sustainability of its economic policies.